technical glitch with the microphone. And so Leroy was graciously helping us out, and Randy will run over. But for the present, myself and then Emmanuel will present without a mic. But we do want the mic just also so the video can pick it up as well. So
We got it here.
Oh, you got it there? All right, cool. But everyone can hear me well, right? In the back? So there might be a slight, Randy might come in and fiddle with it a little, but I think it'll be fine. So at any rate, first and foremost, this is our second to last Artist Now lecture of this semester. We have one more, right when we get returned from Thanksgiving break, November 28th. Xavier Tobis is going to present about ceramics and mixed media. So please join us in 2 weeks for our final Artist Now lecture series. Then spring semester we have a full schedule, another great series of lectures. Already Nathaniel and Christine are working on an unbelievable series for the following year, so things are already falling into place. So do me a favor, hype up this series. I see a lot of folks in the community and a lot of folks from around the university. This series is always designed to be free and open to the public. It really, in my opinion, is the premier contemporary artist lecture series in the city. And the types of artists that are coming in are just extraordinary. So please, pass on the word, attend as many as you'd like, recommend the series. You'll find all the lineup on the Peck School of the Arts website. Just look under Artists Now. So tonight's guest is my guest. You probably noticed that faculty members choose an artist that they'd like to bring in. Usually relates well to their discipline. I would say tonight's guest is perhaps part my guest to relate to the art and ecology classes I teach and the alternative arts practice class I'm teaching this semester too. But it's also Raul Deal's guest as well. Raul, who's doing so much in the community and community arts and the new community arts program. Raul and I really brainstormed on tonight's guest on inviting Emmanuel. Our history, just real briefly, I'm trying to buy a little time for the mic, but Raul and I, many of you might know, we co-organized a show called Watershed, which was a show that looked at freshwater issues around the Midwest and the world. And one of the best things that happened in that show was our relationships that we formed with other people in the community. And one of our best relationships was our relationship with Sweetwater. And we invited Sweetwater Organics to come in because Lisa Moline and Lane Hall urged us to go down to Sweetwater in the very, the early months of that establishment. They said, you will not believe your eyes when you go there. And we truly were just awestruck by the place. I thought, and if you haven't been there, please go there. James Godso, one of the founders, is here tonight. Emmanuel Pratt, who is intrinsically involved in the space, is obviously connected to it as well. But I was blown away by this place. It is truly a visionary project in taking urban farming and aquaponics indoor and really conceptually imagining the Rust Belt as a green belt. And I saw what those folks were doing as sculpture, straight out of the mold of Joseph Boyce. We invited them to create a sculpture for the Watershed project. That's where our relationship really was cemented with the Sweetwater folks, and also Michael Carrier from MSOE, who also collaborates with them as well. Then last fall, Raul and I and Emmanuel spoke at the Imagining America conference up in the Twin Cities. And that was another really dynamic opportunity to really see Emmanuel's work and hear about his practice. And I think Raul and I left saying, we're inviting a guest to Artist Now, it's Emmanuel Pratt, because we were so inspired. So let me read his bio real quickly. How are we doing with the mic? Yeah, can we test it? Should we test it? Yeah. Testing. You're going off that order.
Check 1, 2. One, two. Check. 1, 2.
Oh, okay. All right. So Emmanuel will wear the mic, and I'll just finish with my introduction. As you can see, I like to talk. So there's this connection between Raul and I and Mr. Pratt. But, little to my knowledge, Nathaniel Stern knows Emmanuel from South Africa as well. So it's a really nice serendipitous relationship. So, the bio. I'll read the bio and I'll turn the mic over to someone who's far more interesting than me. Emmanuel Pratt earned his BA in architecture from Cornell University, his master's in science and architecture and urban design from Columbia University, and is presently a doctoral candidate in the PhD program of urban planning at the University of Columbia in New York City. While, shouldn't that be Columbia University? Shouldn't that be Columbia University?
New York City.
I know that, but Columbia. All right,
Yeah.
never mind.
Yeah.
We're still working our kinks here. While most of the early work was anchored in the field of architecture, Emmanuel has worked extensively with the realm of art, graphic design, and interactive media. During 2004 to 2006, Emmanuel moved to South Africa, working as a visiting lecturer at the architecture department at the University of Witwatersrand, with a focus on providing an in-depth survey of computer applications, techniques, and methodologies for architectural design, while investigating the computer as an innovative and creative design tool. Upon his return to the United States, Emmanuel spent 7 years working closely and traveling around the country with MacArthur Genius Award winner Will Allen of Growing Power, and now serves as the executive director for the Sweetwater Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit arm of Sweetwater Organics in Bayview. Emmanuel is currently the director of aquaponics for Chicago State University and teaches courses within the geography department. Emmanuel's professional and academic work has involved explorations and investigations in such topics as urbanization, race and identity, gentrification, and most recently, the transformative process of community developed through the intersection of food security and sustainable design. Now, I invited Emmanuel because he's truly an interdisciplinary artist that works across the fields of urban planning, architecture, photography, and design, and he truly changes our interpretation, or the public's interpretation of what art is and what art can be. I believe he truly transforms communities through his creative processes. So without further ado, Mr. Emmanuel Pratt.
That's way too much of an intro. That was, I'm humbled. It has been an absolute honor to be invited here to talk to you all tonight. I'm still trying to figure this out, where to place it. And it's been an absolute pleasure meeting and working with Raul and Nicholas Lambert. Can you guys hear me? I'm trying to find the right position because it keeps shifting on me. All right, one more time.
You're probably as high as possible.
Yeah. All right, there you go. So when I was asked to do the talk for Artists Now and around the notion of art, I did exactly what I'm doing right now. I stumbled. I was like, well, you know, art. I'm not really necessarily. I personally consider myself an artist. I don't do anything. I'm getting feedback. I don't do any. I dabble in a lot of different things, and I drift and I wander. I think a lot of this presentation tonight is about the drifting and wandering and the creative experience and the reimagining process as well. For the most part, it's always constantly reinventing and reimagining. So, without further ado, reframing the discourse of urban decline through the interface of asset-based community development, social economics, applied science, and project-based experiential learning. Very fancy talk for discourse, right? In the academic world, we know we have to play with words in a certain kind of way, and we'll talk about that as well. I was doing my doctoral work at Columbia University in urban planning, and I shifted from world of architecture. You guys hearing the feedback, right? Yeah. I started off in the world of actually music, and from music, I started dabbling into, my mother was a visual artist and a dancer, and she started just always trying to expose me to as much as possible, different media and different types of things. So I actually started, let me get into this thing here. Sorry. I just thought of something. this is how I started off in mixed media. For the most part, I've been dabbling in between photography, videography, just trying to figure out which medium is the best way for me to express myself. And I have a lot of stuff in journals and notebooks, and this is like a 6-foot by 4-foot canvas mixed media print that I do my journals. When I wander and drift, to wander and drift and take pictures and notes and collage and then think and rethink. And so a lot of the stuff that I go through is around trying to figure out this investigation between language, structure, and agency. Sorry for the shifting of the slides a little bit. So when you start off with something like this, which is in an academic world and is a very specific kind of language and form and syntax and inflection, and you have to present yourself in a certain kind of way, it really is about the discourse and how we have a communication with one another. And the challenge of this paradigm that we're in, and we'll get to that in a second, is how do you have a conversation? There's a million different ways to have conversations and a million different ways of trying to figure out how to reimagine. And it's about finding the right means of communication. And there's always the different types of formulas of discursivity and inclusivity and interdiscursivity. And for the most part, we don't know what the hell the methodology ever is. It's just about how do you become creative and inspire other people to get on the same page as where you are. So my background, as I mentioned, I'm a husband, father, educator, farmer, global citizen, and I definitely dabble in the world of art and mixed media. Tonight I'm going to focus on this issue of rhetoric and the art of discourse. In the drifting process, I've been trying to figure out the best way to present myself, because when somebody says, are you an artist, I generally have to think about it. I don't usually say yes. I just say that I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. But really what it is I'm trying to figure out the logic, the feeling, the emotion, and the ethos, the ethics of what it is that I do. And everything that I do, we try and sustain some level of active reflection. So it's always about this invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery, to play with things. Heuristic. Bear with me on the first portion of this. It gets much more visual as we go through this. Heuristic, this is an academic setting, and I do feel like we should talk about this. Heuristic is a trial and error with the most amount of information that you have, and you try it again. And you learn a little bit more, and you try it again. And you learn a little bit more, and you try it again. And I tend to think of the city as a space to try that, trial and error. So these are some of the images. I also started getting into photography and videography. So the top is Cape Town, the bottom is in Sicily. And I always found myself drifting towards wide panoramic scenes between landscapes and nature and people. And it was always back and forth. And I was using the camera to see, what am I seeing? And for years, I've always just grabbing a camera, just taking a picture, and then trying to figure out what am I seeing. And I'm still figuring it out. In Ethiopia, has anybody heard of Lalibela? The churches of Lalibela? Yeah, so in Ethiopia, there's this red clay earth where King Lalibela, as the myth says, they found a bunch of people to carve by hand ground down and create these series of interconnected churches. So again, wandering and drifting, we ended up having a photo exhibition after this. It was In Search of a Living Architecture is the name of the art exhibition. But meanwhile, in the States, we keep hearing about this obsession with urban growth. And this is the thing that's been capturing my attention. This is in 57th Street in New York. I got to a point where I also like to try and change my vistas and my viewpoints as much as possible. So I climb buildings, bridges, whatever I can get on top of. And so again, these panoramic landscapes of built environment that take different shapes and form, daytime versus nighttime. Obviously, New York is very, very different. So I had a chance and an opportunity to scale the Manhattan Bridge and got a series of photos and pictures. They're pretty large prints, they're huge. But anchored to this issue of urban growth, we also have this issue of urban decline. And we're experiencing a lot of that right now, right? With the economic collapse, everybody keeps talking about this fear and paranoia about this waiting, looming decline, decay. This is in Johannesburg, in the downtown area. This is in New York, back and forth again. So I was just playing and looking at these landscapes of urban development, because I kept finding myself taking different types of pictures and not really understanding why I was gravitating towards what I was gravitating towards. The camera and videography and the interviews, everything for me was just a way to just try and think and take in information and process the information and actually learn more in the process of editing than the process of actually taking the picture. I learned more about myself, and then that inspired me to write. So I also found, this is in Harlem, I was absolutely gravitated towards these buildings in the built environment within the city that are frozen in time. And sometimes they're frozen in time for decades. You know, they're beautiful, aesthetic pieces of work that are just sitting, waiting, because somebody has chosen that they don't have any user value. That's always frustrated me. I live in communities where that is repeatedly the theme, or I watch it happen because somebody has chosen that the area doesn't have any value. So, and then we have these moments. And what happens is we get this ecology of absence that gets created. And one example of an ecology of absence is the Ninth Ward in New Orleans. So again, after I had a lot of friends in between Texas and New Orleans. So after Katrina, I went down and spent a lot of time looking at what was happening, the aftermath of the water and the buildings, what was actually happening in the places that the buildings were fine, but people were forced to move because they were slated for redevelopment. So you have different issues, and again, this ecology of absence, where the nature element just started reclaiming and taking the spaces back over. It became these really, really surreal spaces. Public housing in the United States is absolutely, that's what I got into studying and looking at the policies around it. So I had to go talk to people firsthand and develop a lot of friendships and partnerships for life. What I discovered in my process, and that's why I stumbled into the dissertation, was I wanted to look at what was happening. Why was I drawing certain things? And there was these chronic urban problems with physical deterioration, poverty and unemployment, health issues and environment. And it was almost like a prescriptive pathology, self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. People just determine that area is no good, and then they just write it off. Through blight. Blight is a term that is used, it's the blackening and browning and cancer and decay of a plant so that it can no longer sustain life. It was a term that was transplanted and used to select communities over the past century to discuss issues of economic value or devalue. And it was also very much anchored in the issue of urban renewal. I'm sure we have a lot of this stuff is around this capitalist democratic debate. And we get this interplay of meaning, value in space, and abstraction representation. So that's where I came back into urban agriculture. I know people are like, where the hell is it going with this? I'm totally drifting. And it's intentionally because when you look at the city and you see what's happening and you see the way that we have valued certain things and we have devalued other things, and we've got these spaces that are either frozen in time, waiting for new birth, other spaces that people are valuing, but then they're left empty because there's no economics, there's no economy to support it, and you have this challenge of what is sustainability. And now they're getting these images right now. I don't know if anybody's come across these before, these notions of vertical farming. And the architecture world wants to try and reimagine in a particular way these enormous, beautiful, elegant buildings with life for them. And if you look at that this is a rendering, right, obviously. This is not a real building. But it's a compelling image because it plays with your senses, and people are like, what the hell is it? What is it? How does water work in there? How does soil work in there? How does sunlight work in there? And there's all these questions come around. And this is what people are saying is the future of the city. And again, the scale, this is in New York, and that building on the left is like 40 stories. So, scale is very important when you watch it, when you look at these images. And a lot of times in my profession, in the architecture world, people would render these images in vacuums, which always disturbs the hell out of me. Create an image, this is what the building will be, stick it somewhere, and then the rest of the stuff around it will shape towards whatever that is. We have a lot of conversations through the internet gravitating towards a different type of approach towards the city, where you take shipping containers, and this is actually in Paris. There was an installation done in Paris and Berlin, and taken from place to place, an adaptive reuse of existing shipping container that they build a greenhouse on the top with a different scaffolding structure, and you make use of the natural light, and on the bottom is a fish. But what we're seeing more and more is this cultural contradiction, this interplay of meaning and value. This is the African American parade in Harlem. Young kids that were taking the throwback to the 80s, trying to figure out how to make it 2010. And stuff gets gained and lost, and it's like the droid fighting with the iPhone over who's more authentic. I don't know who wins that battle. But this is where I say the truth lies. This is in Johannesburg, one of the guys I was rolling with, but I use it a lot of times to show people because they think it could be LA. You have no idea. But it's really about the people. I've connected with lots and lots and lots of people. I've gravitated always towards people. I want to hear the stories. I want to capture them, and so I want to figure out how they are relevant in our lives because we all share similar stories. This is in squatter camps in South Africa. I spent a lot of time in squatter camps in South Africa, and also in some squatter camps or shanties in Jamaica, Puerto Rico, in Mozambique. They call it work. So it is really about the human capital. What I think is missing in our understanding of cities is this issue of social capital, human capital, and natural capital. It's pivotal, it's key. Because that is where the creative imagination lies, and that is where we are able to reinvent and adaptively become something new. And that's where we're at right now. We are in a paradigm shift. Paradigm, you have one set of rules where people tell you you have to operate this way, and then you shift into this other paradigm, and you have a new way of thinking and being. And a lot of times when you break those barriers and create new ways of being, a lot of people say you're crazy, or they laugh at you, and all that kind of good stuff. But then eventually they say, you know what, you're right. It's time to shift the way we are. Practice is a key word for myself, but also all the folks at Sweetwater. It's doing and thinking. It's acting and thinking and doing. It's grounding your theory. Very relevant for me, this is Frederick Douglass, where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, where any one class is made to feel like society is an organized conspiracy to oppress and rob and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe. That's a tattoo I have. It's of utmost significance to me because it's from 1886, and it's still the same today, because we choose a certain particular focus on how we develop cities. And just as another little precursor of how I drifted and wandered, I spent a lot of time with Jane Jacobs, the book, not in person. It would have been an honor to spend time with her in person. But as an urban planner, she embraced the fact that we need to look at the issue of disorganized complexity. She challenged that we have a certain kind of way of thinking that is not accurate with the way that life works. She says that, a lot of times people in the planning in the city, they think that you have to have A plus B plus C, housing and transportation, and therefore you have a certain kind of development pattern, and therefore everything else will attract. And that's just not been the case. I ended up back in biology and science through aquaponics. This is me drifting. Going from architecture to urban design to urban planning, and then finding my way back into Growing Power, Sweetwater, Walnut Way in Milwaukee. And it's been very, and it's really been an interesting journey, and I've learned a lot because of the stories and the connections I've shared with people in that process. So at this point, I'm assuming everybody in Milwaukee at least knows what aquaponics is. I'm actually shocked how many people don't know what aquaponics is still. Aquaponics is symbiotic, it's a living ecosystem where you have plants and fish living in recirculating systems. So just real quick snapshot, I'm sure again, I think most people are familiar with Growing Power, community food-based center that was a solution-oriented project looking at issues of food security. How do you take spaces like old greenhouses that were left and forgotten in 2-acre sites within a residential complex that if you go back 80 years to the right, which is a prison, it was this army barracks that actually used to be a prison area. The surrounding area all around used to be farmlands, and then eventually it became suburbia. And then it went from mainly white suburban demographic into a mixed middle, lower income African American mom, this and the other. And what they brought it back to life through food. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Very creative. How do you take waste and turn them into resources? How do you take food scraps and compost them and turn them into energy and turn them into the soil? It took a very creative approach in order to rethink what that space is and redefine and reimagine that space. And then it became a magnet. And then the more he learned about what he was doing through his farm practices, got introduced to aquaponics, then Will started coaching other people on what aquaponics is. And then the space dynamically shifted and it became a space for just creativity, which inspired more growth and development and trying to figure out other ways that are not, $1 million ways of doing it. They're just functional and they work and they create energy and food. And then they attracted the solar panels. And then they've attracted somebody to try and figure out, while architects are trying to figure out, can you do this from a vertical capacity? Brought me to Sweetwater. Sweetwater, for-profit, nonprofit, highly experiment. Sweetwater is anchored in Bayview. Taking an adaptive reuse to a building that used to be this. Images are very powerful. A lot of times when people see this image, you can't help but say, wow. It was a Harnischweger site, so the Harnischweger crane on top was used, and it was known around the world for its strength, and it changed the nature in which crane manufacturing was done. So they also evolved into mining equipment. But, fast forward into the 1980s, the place was left vacant in the 1990s. Deindustrialization, and you have this 6 to 8 acre site that was left abandoned because people didn't think it had use. And then we have the co-founder, James Gonsel, who always laughs at this picture, Josh Mondorf, and a team of people who said, we think and believe in something different. We think that it's time in 2008 to 2009 that space can be brought back to life again. So we talked to people, and we bartered, and we connected, and we shared stories with people, and we excavated, and we used machinery, and then we tried to figure out carpentry. And then the carpenters knew housing developers, and the housing developers knew other people that held other labor, and roofers, and so on and so forth. And then the veterans start showing up, and then other people say, oh, well, I'm a plumber, and I can work, and then the city shows up, and then the horticulturalists show up. And then you have like a living ecosystem within an abandoned building that's been vacant for so long, and you get systems like these. Where you have the fish living on the bottom in the raceways that are in the ground, the water's heated, the water pumps through. At that time it was a water-cooled light system, so the water went through the light to cool off the light, to heat the water to go back into the system to keep the fish happy in the recirculating system. The radiant heat off the water would heat the space, So there was a lot of learning by doing, and it ended up with several iterations of what that aquaponics system meant. And it's going through another iteration right now. We'll talk about that as well. But it also, again, it attracted folks to rethink the space through light, through form. What was the difference between indoors and outdoors? What's the role and purpose of a greenhouse on the outside? And we started a nonprofit. I'm executive director of the nonprofit with the issue of looking at how do we transform waste into community resources. That's the key. So we open up the space to bring people to the space, to have them reimagine, and we have them share their thoughts, and we use it as a space that teachers can have conversations, and then teachers and other students, and students from other areas. Milwaukee is a hyper-segregated and very interesting place with lots of amazing talent, and it's just about exposure and getting people to rethink and reimagine what those possibilities are. So we try to use this space as much as possible for convening and meeting of the minds. We would have weddings, and we'd have, birthday parties, and we'd have all this stuff, all these different variations of life in this space that, for whatever reason, people deemed had no value. For whatever reason, they said no life exists there. So we also like to try and equip our students and trick them into learning, trick them into figuring out science and chemistry and biology by actually putting some tools in their hands and make that learning process not abstract. So we were curious how far back we could go with it, and we started extending all the way back to kindergartners. They're the less tainted in this world, right? So we try to focus with them and let them be as creative as possible, and then let them create plays and let them take photos and do funny poses because it's fun. Across the street, this is Texas Boston Christian Academy, where we work with them to look at aquaponics and urban agriculture. And across the street, we have this organic therapy project with the National Association of Black Veterans and Center for Veterans Issues. It has an old hospital that got converted into a housing space for 200 veterans. And they had looked at the issue of food as a therapy piece in the backyard, and in the backyard they started doing, with the compost from Sweetwater, they started growing food. And so we invited the veterans in, we welcomed them to our space with the tables donated from the Waldorf School in Chicago, with it's a very, very remixed space. And they took an old carriage house space that was in the back that was, again, wasted away for God knows how long. And they took food-grade barrels, cracked them open, converted them into an aquaponic system, and that was part of the extension of their organic therapy project. Then they became the mentors for the kids across the street. So then we had this other connections that started to happen and create more questions and more thoughts. This is over at Fernwood Montessori. Matt Ray is one of the teachers. He's also a key person with Sweetwater. We met some really amazing people, and he inspired the school to look at a greenhouse as a living learning laboratory, a living learning center. So on the asphalt that was typically just sitting there, he created a labyrinth. He created an aquaponics system that now feeds into Sweetwater, that feeds back out into the neighborhood, that feeds back into, we actually have a connection now with Chicago. So every time there's a new type of system, plastic bottles, wasted bottles, what do you do with them? Typically you throw them away. What else can you do with them? You can grow food with them. So we also started looking at how do we use digital media in this creative process. We have kids that do sketches all the time. A lot of times, most people in the classroom don't really pay attention in class. I was one of those kids. And we work a lot with youth like that are just, they want to be engaged and want to do creative stuff. So we open it up into the digital media world so they can start playing and interplaying with stuff as they're building it. So really trying to use this as a creative process to teach the science, technology, biology, engineering, mathematics, art. and taking stuff that is around, just a push cart that you find in pretty much any classroom, and what systems can you use to build and design. That was right around the time that we met with Raul and Nicholas Lampert to talk about the watershed exhibition, and they asked us if we would be interested in putting an aquaponics system in the gallery, and we were kind of like, yeah, of course. I mean, is that technically fall in the issue of art? But then we talked about the issue of water and light and food, art as activism particularly. And you have this thing that's a living ecosystem that grows over time, that engages people. And it very much did fit, and I can't thank you so much for that opportunity to be involved in that. That was an amazing experience, and can't wait to see where that ends up the next iteration. Right after that, I did an artist residency in the Hyde Park Art Center in Milwaukee, in Chicago. Hyde Park Art Center, they asked me if I was open to taking a space that was a black space that had nothing in it, and I said, sure. Why not? What do you want to use it for? I don't know yet. We'll try and figure out. I need space to think through all these photos and videos and edit. And it was a perfect timing. So it was right around the time I actually started thinking through my dissertation on the walls. So I started just taking the space and take the chalk to the wall, open it up, and then started thinking through everything. Space every day would change and evolve, and then I'd hand some chalk to somebody as they came into the conversation, and then the space would change again. We'd have sketches and diagrams, and we'd record people's conversations and take turns, and it was a really fun space, and everybody was involved. We also got to try and figure out where aquaponics might fit within the home or in the school. What is the role of urban agriculture? What are the adaptive repurpose? $7 you can grow peppers in your windowsill. And started attracting a lot of folks that shared similar interests. And it was not about, that's the one thing I love about Sweetwater and the group. It's not about the individual at all. It is about the ecosystem. It's about everybody that is coming together to share these different thoughts and ideas. So the space became, this is a think tank area, but I also dabble in photography and Photoshop and Illustrator. So I started taking the portraits of people and then using them into the graphics that was coming out of it whenever it was a side note, doodle, think, and then we turned it into wall murals. So my friends, again, are all artists, and so we turned those into mural moments, and we invited the kids to write and do reflections based on what they thought out of the space, and created events. We had live music, live food, cooking, we had poets, we did a couple of events called the Preservation of Poetry, and we had, at the open house, we had age 1 to 97. It's pretty amazing. And it was a very, very creative space. I showed this just because I wanted to show the repetition. We're doing the same thing in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. I'm director of the Aquaponics Center at Chicago State University now, because the university was inspired by what Sweetwater was doing, and also wanted to deal with the reality of food and food issues. If you have vacant warehouse space, can you do this? Is a replicable thing? How do you get people to think differently, and particularly in areas like south side of Chicago that are plagued by issues of crime and poverty? So we took a shoe warehouse, and in that shoe warehouse, we started looking at the space, mapping out the space, and instead of the wood, we actually took the metal racks that were in the shoe warehouse, the wood that was in the metal racks, the wood, whatever we could get from the shoe warehouse, working with a guy named Miles Harston from Aqua Ranch, another aquaculturalist that we attracted along the way. And we started seeing in the sunroom space, we have lots of fish and greens. Lettuce, basil, arugula chard, various different types of greens, year round. And it began, again, we experienced the same thing. We created an experiment, a series of experiments that became magnets, and the byproduct was that we had people coming from all over, and a lot of people, particularly this group, it was from Francis Parker, they were from the north side of Chicago, that wouldn't really ever come down to the south side of Chicago. And it was a nice place where we could have these kids come together and meet and share thoughts and ideas. And again, we're having community-based meetings in those spaces. So we're going through this transformation. This goes back, for a little bit, we were working with Milwaukee. Milwaukee, as a city, we're working with IBM for the Smarter Cities for Smarter Challenge, Smarter Cities for Smarter Planning Global Challenge. And their conclusion was that they thought that this Milwaukee was a proof of point, and it was a place where smarter cities feeding themselves was a good idea, and it could go global. So the last piece I'll talk about is this aquaponics piece. And you'll be hearing a lot more about this. We had to figure out, how do we make this work in the school system, within a school system that is going through a lot of struggles and challenges and is not able to keep a lot of the kids engaged. We wanted to make sure, everybody keeps talking about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but they don't talk about art. For the most part, art is the first thing that is defunded or stripped out. And there's not, how do you have an engineer or a scientist without art? I don't understand how that process really works. There's a creative process, there's an art of science. So we decided to turn aquaponics into this throwback to a badge, like the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. So we said, if you break it into water, plants, fish, and design and construction, sneak in the art and the design and construction process. And in order for you to learn how to do the plants, you have to learn how to do the fish, and you have to figure out the water, and you have to figure out the system, and it all works together. And everything you do, quantitative and qualitative analysis, you have to think through it, you have to draw it, you have to demonstrate it, you have to share it with other people, and you get a badge. After you performed it for a little while, you become an advanced beginner. After you've done it for a little while longer, you become a competent performer. By the time you're a competent performer, we place you in an internship, an externship, and eventually we just want to see where you end up. We've been starting to assign these badges with our partners over the years, and we're starting to see them end up in culinary arts, in the grocery, real estate, the architecture, engineering, all these different areas. And we're starting to see a new way of thinking emerge. And the best part about this is co-sponsored by the Mozilla Foundation and MacArthur Foundation. So it's global. We're going to be launching this sometime in the spring or fall next year. So we're working on the website right now. But the best part about it is that a lot of kids don't have an opportunity to really share all of their creativity in one space, and this basically transforms your learning process into an instant portfolio. So you can walk out and say, look, I went through all these bad programs, I went through all these skills, and I've had internships, and you can click on, you can share it in an instant, and share with wherever you want to go. And we send it to our network because we're constantly in conversations. And I would encourage any person to have a conversation with James Gottsel about the creative process behind Sweetwater and the human process behind Sweetwater. He's in email conversation with about 30 countries a day. I'm not kidding. He wakes up in the morning, he sends an email out to about 5,000 people, and then sees what comes back in the evening. So that's our landscape. The vacant buildings, the vacant lots, the places that people forget and feel they don't have any value. Those are the ones we're drawn to, not for ruin porn that everybody likes to go to Detroit for. I want to take pictures of these vacant buildings. No. I want to do something about those vacant buildings. So we're working on this project. If you envision this place as becoming a community center or as a wellness center or as something else, call, text, or email. We have a way that we can geo-plot. We're working with some programmers to create maps and to create a consensus and to show the aldermen in the neighborhoods to say, look, we have all these people that say they want something different in that neighborhood. What else is happening with them? And then there's banks that have a conscious, I guess. Bank of America just launched $22 million to nonprofits to get foreclosed houses and certain types of foreclosed buildings because they don't want it on their portfolio anymore. They don't want the responsibility of it. So they're giving it to nonprofits and want to figure out what else can we do with it. So we're going after a couple of these in other neighborhoods. So yeah, the city becomes a landscape where we just try and figure out, these are portraits, these are photos taken by a handful of folks within our neighborhood, I mean, within our network of photographers, that we create banners, we post them up into areas, and we try and elicit people's responses. Just recently, we did an installation at Merchandise Mart, as inspired by, of all things, the Watershed exhibition. Partnering with an architecture firm, a lighting firm, furniture design, trying to figure out what does the dining room reimagined look like. They did it on a super high end. It doesn't have to be super high end at all. It could be, but it was interesting to see the conversation around food and the necessity of food and the issues of water. It was a light change, you know, based off the movie. It was pretty cool. And that's my talk. So I wanted to keep it within a certain window, about an hour, because I don't like the talking head thing. A lot of times, even when I teach at Chicago State or wherever I do lecture, I like to actually have a conversation with people. So I want to open it up to have a conversation with you all, because this is about the discourse. Anybody have any questions about anything? Sure.
The first building that you showed that the veterans took over, the carpenters took over, was zoning a problem, or it would just seem to me that that could be a crippling issue? And how did you handle it?
We've handled it by the politicians at that particular stage said the best thing in our interest is to move out the way and let people do what they need to do, because we don't know if this is going to work or not. And, zoning played in our favor in manufactured. Have you guys filmed the scene in manufactured landscapes? If you haven't, you should. It's pretty interesting. But there's manufactured zoning for manufacturing, and it was interesting. Good conversation with the city, because they said, well, technically, that's an area for manufacturing, and what you can do is something within the realm of manufacturing, and we don't have any kind of, it's not slated for redevelopment for anything anytime soon. So those are the spaces that, not just Milwaukee, Chicago, and New York, and New Jersey, and all these other places are looking at some kind of adaptive reuse that could come in to provide some other form of production. So they're actually the spaces with that zoning, the manufacturing zoning, that people were most lenient. There were issues of building permits. You had the inspectors come in, the water permits, and then all that kind of good stuff. Because eventually, you know, people want to figure out how they can, what do you fit within the structure that can be taxed, and but the zoning for manufacturing areas is much more lenient than residential neighborhoods. Put it out. Yeah.
When you talk about experiential or situated learning, you're basically challenging the conventional existing educational system.
Every step.
And when you're talking about like urban farming and stuff, you're basically challenging the existing structure of power and capital. So maybe the question is, how do you conceptualize your relationship with all these old powerful structures? Are you negotiating with them, or do you have any strategies? Are you competing with them, or just completely ignoring them and doing your job?
Powerful structures meaning like?
Educational system, like structure of power.
Flip through that one slide. This is the key. Rhetoric. You familiar with this term? If you're not, you should look it up. It's the way you can have. It's the art of having a conversation with somebody. So when somebody says, when you go into a conversation and you know who your audience is, and you know that there's, realistically, who's going to argue with food security, career development, environmental awareness and sustainability, and education? That's where we start our conversations. And if the conversation goes awry, really goes left, right, real south, real quick, we know that there's not much of a window there. All we want is the first step. We want the crack in the window, the door is open. And we show them and demonstrate along the way. Look at what's happening. You have your attendance rates that go up. You know, you have more people that show up that actually want to learn. You have more people that are actually engaged in the educational process. You have kids that are not being, you know, and then when you create the space to allow all these, at Sweetwater we've had these aquaponics in a classroom showcases where we invite all these different youth and their parents and then the grandparents and then some architect or some restaurant, and we have the foundations all show up in the same space. You invite the mayor's people, you invite so-and-so, and you have this really, really interesting conversation that happens that people say, I guess this thing is working. And then it creates another space. IBM, people wondered why in the world would IBM be trying to do the Smarter Cities for a Smarter Planet piece. And in all honesty, they're like a global consultant trying to figure out, IBM has a very interesting history. But they came and they said, we think that this idea of smarter cities feeding themselves for a smarter planet is right on time. Because for them, they're coming in because they're looking at technologies. For them, they're looking at water industry, they're looking at sensors, they're looking at all that kind of stuff. And for us, we were looking at democratizing, scaling out, globalizing, sharing the information as fast as possible. And the second you can put this on the internet and share it with 15 different people. This past summer, we sent 10 students from UW-Madison to India to do an aquaponic system in Kerala, India, Kochi. And those kids are now, it attracted 100 students at the university that were studying aquaculture but had never done the process. They hadn't had that experiential learning. The president of the university said this is a great experience for our students. We have to rethink how we're doing it. Now those students are emailing Madison, Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, so-and-so, and now they're all sharing information, what's working, what's not, and that's how we have that conversation.
First, thank you for your talk and your work.
Thank you.
It's both very provocative as a symbol, but also important in what it does. I have two questions. The first is, if someone like me said, wow, this is fantastic, I want to donate a couple hours of my time every few weeks to this project, what would be the best way we could do that? And the second is, how do I get my daughter enrolled in that Merit Badge program?
Okay. The answer to both questions is just email info@sweetwaterfoundation.com. We only have .com because the person who had .org wouldn't sell it to us.
Jerks.
It is what it is. info@sweetwaterfoundation.com, and I'm gonna 2151 South Robinson in Bayview, or you can email or call James Gotzel. Email, not call. Email gotzel.james@gmail.com, aka the Wormmon. I didn't really get a chance to talk about him and the performance art that he does. You can tell about the Wormmon and how to get in contact with you.
My last name is spelled Godsil. I am obsessive and compulsive about answering emails.
He is walking performance art. There was one question.
Yeah, you were speaking about working with schools. I'm assuming that a representative from the school approaches you. What is the relationship that Sweetwater Organics has with the school? Like how long is that program sustained in the school, or is it more of like a one-time project?
No, we try not to do anything that's one time.
Right.
Because it's not sustainable.
Exactly.
right, by definition. You do something, so Sweetwater Organics formed because it was a for-profit company trying to figure out that piece. Then Sweetwater Foundation formed to try and figure out the nonprofit and bring in the schools. So at first, we started off by going out, combing, and knowing what teachers do we know, what principals do we know, We go off to the principal first and foremost to say, we want to work with you. This goes back to the other question. Principal says yes, check. You're in. Now the trick is working with the teachers who are doing the work, that are overloaded, that are stressed, that are trying to figure out how to maintain. And so you can't just work with one teacher. You want to work with as many different teachers as possible. The art teacher, the science teacher, the math teacher, the engineering, the history, the custodian, the janitorial crew, the this, whoever else you can get in. And then each one of them you say, like, look, our strength is in numbers here. So we got the approval. We want to figure this out. Everybody's kind of figuring out, like, well, I don't want to overload myself. I definitely want to do something creative and fun, but it's so much work to try and rethink this structure, this force that is weighing you down, right? It's depressing. So we said, all right, we'll try and figure out a small group first. Within that, 5 people. Make sure you grab 3 to 5 of your top students you know are interested, that are good people. And then you can get the class clown, because they're good talkers. They're good jokesters. They can get people in their magnets. You can get the kid who likes to draw, that doesn't do well at taking notes at all. You have, make sure you get that good math person, because they're also good note takers, right? And we figure out the personality balance. You do a field trip, you see it. Once you see it, you say, who wants to do this project? And then we try and figure out how we can go back to the school and figure out the scale of the project that works with you. The best part about it now is that we've got this 3 years running, and we've got a network of people that we can send to help out as much as possible. So we don't want the one-off. We're doing an event. We've been doing an event past year, but we have 3 cities coming to meet each other in Milwaukee sometime in the spring for our harvest celebration. They're doing a design competition. Rufus King and Vincent is doing a design competition against Whitney Young and another school in Chicago, and they're going to come together and figure out which one has a better. It's a healthy design competition, pun intended. They're emailing and videoing and putting YouTubes back and forth, trying to figure out who's got best system and most creative system, and so we're going to try and have fun. And then we'll have the Octopons there badging and trying to figure out who's it's a fun space. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say to the entire audience is after your talk, people can come up and talk to Emmanuel and talk to James Godsill if they want to plug in. But my question is, could you talk about the new reiteration of Sweetwater and how it's developing, and also how it operates locally and also internationally? Because
Sure.
It seems like Sweetwater is in a new phase, perhaps going smaller, but also as a conceptual project, Sweetwater and Growing Power inspire so many people around the world just by what you're talking about tonight.
We've had, wow, what a multifaceted question. Okay, this goes back to the other question, the power and the power structures. The first thing is people said, does this thing make money? If it doesn't make money, I don't want to hear about it. Everybody says that. And the honest answer to that is, when has farming in the history of the United States ever really been profitable? Honestly. But nobody wants to hear that. There is a sustainable network of vast profitability if you talk about natural capital, social capital, human capital, and the inspiration that we draw in and shared resources and all that kind of stuff. But most people want to talk about what's the fastest return on investment, 18 months, 24 months, I don't care about the rest of that stuff. So we said, all right, we'll play a game. We start off by saying this is possible. There is an area of square footage per yield, per pound, per kilowatt hour analysis, and you bring in the engineers and all that kind of stuff. The first phase of Sweetwater was really looking at that, but that's how we also started our partnership with the universities. Say, how can you ask these questions without having a relationship with the universities in the mix? And how can you do that without having the kids in the mix to learn that? Because who else are you going to hire at a place like this? Right? Because they don't really exist. So it started off very, very big, trying to go big very fast. And that worked to its benefit because it drew a lot of people. Not just from Milwaukee, from Chicago, Detroit, New York, California. We had visitors from Tokyo, we had visitors from Uganda, we had visitors from Nigeria, we had visitors from Scotland, Hawaii. It's remarkable who else has just come to say we support this too. But in our area, it's a different kind of culture, it's a different kind of food, it's a different kind of product that we can grow and how we can sell it, and there's different issues of sustainability. So as we have been going through that process, you know, how much you can grow indoors is limited by how much natural light you have, period. How much space you have also limits what you can grow, period. Outside becomes a great space. If you learn how, and what we're looking at right now is how do you contain the fish within a closed space, and you pump the water out to the fish. The greens that live in the greenhouse that can filter the water to come back into the fish. You can do more climate control inside the fish. You can figure out the temperature variation for different crops on the outside of the greenhouses. But more importantly, it's not trying to go too big. We're looking at the small scale iterations that are the replicable pieces, the ones that you can go into the aquaponic miniatures, the ones that can go into the office, the house, the education schools. And we're also putting a call out to artists, most importantly. With this project with Nicholas Lampert and Raul and Godsel and all these different, we are challenging folks to bring art as an activist concept. We're challenging folks to say, here's your space to reimagine, and let's see what happens. I mean, you can talk about that.
I think all the time, every day.
Okay, all right. But we absolutely are. We are asking people to come and help us reconstruct. And we're going through Sweetwater Phase 1, Sweetwater Phase 2. We're entering this other Phase 3. Is it 3 or 4?
It's down to 2.
It's 2. Okay. All right. We had a hybrid notion, and we are much more shrinking it down and inviting. Our tagline is "There grows a neighborhood." Put it that way. And we want to see that happen in every way possible. We've been talking to MATC about possibly having a culinary program. Basically, take one of the aquaponic systems and incorporate it into their curriculum. We're talking about one of the schools we work with Loyola Academy, which became Centro Hispano. English is a second language class, and they got funds to do a charter school, Centro Hispano, so we're saying, you know, hey, why don't you have part of this space? And then they can take one of the smaller scale systems. So we're trying to, the veterans as well. The veterans are going to be key in this as well. They have all types of skills and assets, and there's folks coming back, and it becomes one ecosystem. That's the goal.
I should note, on Tuesday, Michael Carey and I met with James and Jesse and others, and we're taking a small corner and building an experimental art space inside the building.
So if you haven't had a chance to talk to Mike Carrier, you should do that too. He's doing a project. It's a house, the Heartland House, that used to be his house, that Mike Carrier purchased, and then he's welcoming artists and folks to figure out what creative stuff they can do with the house. So the garage becomes open source, the backyard becomes collective, and then as you get inside the house, it becomes more private and personalized. But it's all about the shared learning experience. So we're really about trying to open source and democratize almost everything. We want to have a personal life though. Right? Yeah. Questions, comments? Yeah.
How can surface learners be involved with?
Great question. Goes back to your question. You work within the structure. Milwaukee, Chicago, most of our schools, they have a lot of, it's an afterthought, the service learning piece, whereas this is embedded. So you come and work with us, you're doing stuff maybe at Sweetwater, but bottom line is we have churches, we have partner sites that need hands. So you can come with us for a little bit, you learn, but then you're going out and translating what you did at the different locations. Prime example, over the summer, we in Chicago, you know, at Chicago State. We had 100 youth that we had as interns and summer employment, but we also had folks that had to get their service learning hours. And we took 4 sites within a 2-mile radius that all were trying to talk about urban gardening. They had spaces. So we took one space that was a 3-acre asphalt. And it was 2 church ladies over the age of 70 that said, we want to do something with this property. And we're tired of paying property tax. And we have a 501c3. And we want to do good for the community, not just save money. Well, take the money we're paying on the property tax, give it to kids to do something over the summer, and actually give back to the community, to do community allotment gardens. So in 2 weeks, we got them 30 raised beds on their asphalt with the 100 kids that we had. And they all got their service learning hours. Right? You just rework the logic of the system and it works. We took those same kids and we said, what'd you learn from here? Go over to this site, it's 3 minutes away. But it's a housing townhouse. It's a co-op, cooperative, 803 units that had a 2 and 3 acre grass site that nobody would use, and then there was a lot of crime and stuff. But we had the same kids go over here, and they invited their friends, and then next thing you know, we had a garden set over here, and we took that space and we went over to the next space and did it over here. And then at the end of the summer, we had a harvest celebration where all those people came to us and we all celebrated together. Everybody wins.
So do you see yourself, right now you're speaking about baby areas, right? But
No.
you're not tied to just baby.
Not just baby. No, we've had people from all over trying. We tried it. The trick is the sustainability piece is harder. I mean, we operate as a small unit. We have this phrase where like you have like 3 people, but you try as much as possible to operate as a collective unit of 300. So you got to know your limits. So we try to have relationships north side, south side, try and bring people together as much as possible. Chicago. Yeah.
We just met 2 days ago with the Urban Ecology Center and ACTS Housing out at Washington Park on the west side.
Right.
And I found out that any one of you all could get hold of a house between Lisbon, Fleet, 27th and 47th, and spend about $350 a month payment to own that house. And we're going to help whoever does get one of these 10 houses set up aquaponics system in the house, or hoop house, or raised bed gardens. They're also going to get access to bicycles and membership in the Urban Ecology Center at Washington Park, and other amenities connected with going from renter to homeowner around foreclosed homes and stabilizing neighborhoods. So the Bayview spot is just a center, but we're very, very eager to have Sweetwater miniatures in every neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you gave us good news. Your stories end up in harvest festivals, but there must have been tears.
Oh yeah.
So tell me 3 stories of what was really difficult, that brought you to tears, and how you got out of it. We need to learn that too.
Great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I can give you 3 off the top of my head. Not a short amount of time.
Okay, 1.
No, I'm trying to think what's the best one. I mean, we've had situations where best of friends have come into the space and said, you know, let's do this together. Let's figure this out. They came on board, and 6 months later they were at war with each other because they were trying to figure out, well, my decision is better. My decision is better, and this is the way we should be doing it. Well, how do you know? And and then because it was a lot of the trial and error, and no one really knew what the best way was. And we've had people that the best way that we get around that is we had to bring other people into that conversation and to diffuse that conversation. as much as possible and say, we actually started bringing in the universities. We had some of the college kids that came in and to participate in some of those conversations, figure out which way is the right way. And then eventually they got over their hurdles, and then they went their separate directions. They ended up not working with us anymore. But they still are, they talk and they support the project. We've had a system, we've had systems that partnerships that we've gone into that we swore were the right partnership. Everything on paper was the right partnership. And when you actually get into the practice of that partnership and the relationship of that partnership, and it quickly looked like it was headed towards a divorce, not a marriage. And you just wanted it not to be a battery situation. You know, we've had those real life scenarios, experiences. They're not always, I mean, we've had situations where,
Where we pissed away a lot of money.
yep, that too. Somebody says, here, just do this, and they say do it, and it's unchecked, and then all of a sudden the money's gone. They're like, what'd you do with the money? Where's the money? Where's the return? Where's my payback? And they were like, we're figuring it out. We'll get back to you. And then that caused a lot of heartache and headache between all of us. We've been under microscopic lenses for doing experiments, and people say, well, I thought you had it all figured out. And we're like, nah, we're figuring it out. Back off.
Tell me your artists.
Yeah, they love that answer. We've had situations, we've gone into partnerships with folks that didn't make it. They were killed, right? Or just, whatever, locked up, disappeared. Those are painful. So, I mean, it's life, you know. Yeah, anything else?
We killed a lot of fish.
We kill fish. That's painful too. I mean, when you have a system that everybody's so sure about, and everybody's so steadfast, and they're like, oh, I know this is gonna work, and that's just never gonna be an option, and then, oh, really? Boom. Yeah, it's like divine comedy. And then you better learn from that mistake real fast, or else you're gonna repeat it, and then the stakes get higher and higher and higher. We had a situation where, like, the fish feeder, some folks said they swore that you could just automate certain things. And the pressures were on because they wanted to figure out how to minimize certain labor costs and automate. And then the fish feeder spun out of control. And then all of the food just dumps into the water. And then now you're having nitrite spikes, pH spikes, and then other types of stuff, creating an epic collapse that you have to race against the clock to figure out what you do. It's not easy.
A new motto, God is great, tie your camel. Sweetwater is great, keep your day job.
Walking art.
Emmanuel, what did you say Godzilla was a cross between?
He's the walking, reincarnated, living embodiment of Mark Twain and Albert Einstein. And also Joan of Arc. Yeah.
Better hair.
Mike, Carrier. Challenges and obstacles.
In terms of
Sweetwater.
money.
Be honest, Mike.
Go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, I would say, and the idea that certain partners have money, when at this time no one has money. And then, at least from my perspective, people are trying to not just like fight over a limited amount of funding, but not even funding itself, but I think for me the challenge is rethinking the way things get funded, period.
Absolutely.
And as Sweetwater evolves, I think that's huge. And not necessarily trying to replicate what Will Allen has done at Growing Power by going after large-scale funding opportunities like the MacArthur Foundation, but finding ways to do it the people in communities can do.
Mhm.
That's why I like the Heartland House idea, that's why I like working with the vets on foreclosed homes, because that's doable. Starting a huge scale farm in an abandoned factory building, for most people, is not.
So, you know, it's funny, it was, because I drift and wander, and I was looking at, of all people, Abraham Lincoln, his speech in 1859 to Milwaukee's Agricultural Society. You guys know this history at all? He had a speech in which he said that, when has a behemoth farm ever worked? He says, we're transitioning, this is in 1859, he said we're transitioning into a new way of being, and land has a different kind of value, and we want to try and figure out how to maximize small spaces. He also said that the best education in life is through agriculture. He also said that every blade of grass is a school of thought. It was weird. It was weird reading that. Especially after everybody's been talking about Lincoln and the movie coming out, the vampire movie coming out. I think what we're fortunate to experience right now is that we have a certain level of resilience within the key partners, and it is the key partnerships outside of our immediate Sweetwater family that are really like the artists that are in the room, and then Mike Carrier with the Heartland House, that constantly see the new opportunity, and we see the truth in where the space can go. And I think opening it up to these kind of creative moments is where, that's where, we talked about that before, it's like when you shift and you have this paradigm shift, there are these key moments in time that allow for a window of creative thought for people to challenge the norm and think differently. And we're in that window right now, and we would explore you to just do whatever you think is the right thing and push forward, and then come enjoy our story and share whatever way you want to contribute. Yeah.